In this week's Helicopter podcast, I sit down and talk with Ben Clayton. Ben is the CEO of Life Flight Network. If you're not familiar with Life Flight Network, they're the fourth largest air medical company in the United States, and they're located up in the Pacific Northwest, actually near my hometown. So that was really exciting to go and have that conversation. We talk about Ben's military experience. We talk about his transition over to the civilian world. And then we talk about how he became the CEO of Life Flight from starting there as a line pilot. That's right, a line pilot in 2015. So this is an awesome story, an awesome conversation. And if you're interested in becoming an air medical pilot, Ben and I kind of discuss our opinions on air medical and what it's like to be an air medical pilot. And if you've maybe ever considered going the administrative executive route in helicopters, then this is also a great episode for you, as Ben has worked his way up through the ranks to now be the CEO. Awesome chat. I loved recording it, and I think you'll love it as well.
As always, a special thanks to Celicopter for producing this podcast. Specializing in helicopter evaluations, faster sales, and superb service, Celicopter is the go-to agency for clients expecting immediate results. Celicopter's team of helicopter professionals are the best in the business. Using their aviation expertise, a nationwide network, and a proprietary 76-step listing strategy, Celicopter will convert your listing from Mayday to payday. Ready to get started? Text helicopter to 1-855-Celicopter. That's helicopter to 1-855-735-5226. And a Celicopter pilot agent will reach out. Celicopter. List it, sell it, done.
All right. Well, welcome to the Helicopter podcast. I'm Halsey and I am at Life Flight Network today up in Aurora, Oregon, with the CEO, Ben Clayton. Ben, what's going on?
Hey, Halsey, nice to see you. Thanks for coming in.
I feel like we could be brothers. Maybe
we got the same haircut anyways.
Same haircut. This is audio only, but just to set up the scene, Ben and I both have a great head of hair. By head of hair, I mean we have no hair, but we both have great shaped heads. So I think that's a good step in the right direction. Well, thank you so much for having me up here today. This is awesome.
Yeah, thanks for coming out.
We were kind of talking about it before, but growing up just down the road in Lake Oswego, if you're listening to the podcast, don't judge, but that's where I grew up. Life Flight was flying over my house all the time, coming back to Aurora or whatnot. And seeing those helicopters, I think actually kind of planted the seed. I always wanted to be a pilot. I thought kind of more of an airplane guy. But seeing the helicopters constantly and then doing some flight training in airplanes out here at Aurora Aviation and seeing the helicopters here kind of inspired me. So to me, it's kind of like a pinch me moment to be sitting with you, the CEO of this company that I've been familiar with for so long. So it's just really grateful to be here. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, great, and hopefully we can inspire another generation of young guys to come up and
totally
and be pilots.
Yeah, it's actually been really cool. Some of the biggest response that I've gotten the podcast is a lot from young men and women that are either just starting their flight training or they're getting into it, and the number one job that they want is air medical. So it's pretty cool to hopefully be able to share your experience, not only as a military pilot converting over to civilian, and then line pilot now to CEO, and some of my past experiences as well to hopefully keep encouraging people to apply for jobs in the air medical field.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to hear that you get a lot of feedback about people that want to be air ambulance pilots because they're in need. It's a pretty good schedule. You get to be home every night. Typically, it's a 7-day on, 7-day off thing, and then you're out there helping save lives every day. So it's a pretty cool job.
Yeah, the mission specific is really cool, and I think actually for the civilian sector, it's kind of like the coolest job that you can have. I mean, I guess there's like, yeah, if you hang a saw from a helicopter, that's pretty cool too, or like the old heli torch. But as far as like for me, I flew air medical. Being able to fly a fairly well-equipped helicopter with autopilot and MVGs is not something that a lot of civilians get to experience.
Yeah.
You military guys obviously have more experience in getting to do that. So I think as a civilian job goes, it's kind of the closest thing that we can get to flying in the military, which I think is pretty cool. That's what I really enjoyed about it. And yes, the schedule was great, 7 on, 7 off. Is that what you guys are doing up here?
Yes, yep.
Is there any mix in that, or is it just, I know that some places have kind of different 4 nights on, then 3 days. Is it just 7/7 rotating days and nights?
Yeah, typically we'll do either 3 days on followed by 4 nights on, or 4 days on followed by 3 nights. There's, the float pilots, their schedule kind of can change a little bit depending on when and where they're needed. But yeah, for the most part, it's, you get 182 and a half days off a year. And then, yeah.
That's awesome. So I want to learn about you and your past and everything, but just to kind of set the scene a little bit for our listeners, I'm, of course, very familiar with Life Flight Network being from this area. But if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about Life Flight Network, the history, your guys' service area, what you guys are operating airplane-wise, helicopter-wise, just kind of give us that picture.
Yeah, thanks. Well, by the time this podcast airs, we'll have celebrated our 45th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Of being in service in this area. We started out in a 1974 Alouette 3.
Nice.
Was our first helicopter. In fact, we've got the tail boom out in the hangar from that helicopter, and we're going to get it fixed up and painted up nicely and restored, and figure out something cool to do with it, kind of in celebration of our anniversary.
I'm almost even having a hard time like picturing how you put a patient in an Alouette. I guess I can kind of see it. But yeah, I'm glad that worked.
Yeah, so we've come a long ways since then. So now, here we are, 45 years later. We're the 4th largest air ambulance company in the country. We're the largest not-for-profit air ambulance company in the country. We're owned by a consortium of 4 health systems: so Oregon Health and Science University, Providence, Legacy, and St. Alphonsus Regional Medical Center over in Boise. And we've grown over the years, really in response to the needs of the communities. As a not-for-profit, I mean that's our one goal. It's save lives, be available to the communities, in service to them, and provide excellent level of patient care. And so that's where we are now. We currently have 28 rotor bases and 10 fixed-wing bases.
That's incredible. And airframe-wise, on the helicopter side,
Yeah.
I guess we can kind of talk about the airplanes, but who cares? No, I'm kidding. But on the helicopter side, what are you guys operating right now?
Yeah, so we've got a mixed fleet a bit, as you imagine. We're being in 4 different states. There's different environments, different requirements in each of those. So we're in Oregon, Idaho, Washington, and Montana, and so we have a mix of Bell 429s. We've got Airbus EC-135, mostly P2 pluses. We've got Bell 407 GXIs, and then we have AW119 KXs.
Very cool. And what's the total fleet size?
We're about 50 aircraft total, and with 10 or 12 fixed wing, and then the rest is helicopters.
That's crazy. So 45 years, you've gone from one Alouette now to airplanes, helicopters, bases all over. And the service area is Oregon?
Yeah, Oregon, Idaho, Washington, and Montana is where our bases are located. Obviously, we'll take patients where they need to go. So, if they need to go to Salt Lake or Colorado or wherever they need to go, we can get them there.
Very cool. The guy that did all my check rides was I think a 30-year pilot here at Life Flight.
Oh, cool.
Mark Holstadt.
Yeah.
I don't know if that name
it does
rings a bell.
And in fact, we have the Life Flight 2. It's our Aurora headquarters. Is the Mark Holstadt kind of commemorative base. So yeah,
I think I heard
he's a legend,
something about that. Yeah, because I think when he was doing my check rides, which was some years ago, I feel like he was at 27 or 28 years already.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, oh man, keep a good relationship with this guy, and maybe I can get a job at Life Flight.
Yeah, well, he's kind of a legend, so.
He's a bit of a legend, and the nicest guy ever. I don't know if you had a chance to interact with Mark, but he's a gentle giant. Love doing my check rides with him. So, kind of transitioning over to you.
Yeah.
You started in the military. You're from Oregon.
Yeah.
You literally grew up in Canby. I'm pointing like people can see where I'm
Right,
pointing.
yeah.
But if you're listening and you're not familiar with the area, this is pretty neat. The fact that you're essentially in your backyard and you're the CEO of the fourth largest air medical provider in your backyard.
Yeah.
Like, was that, it's like a Nicholas Sparks book. Like, this is perfect. Like, how did that all work out? And, you know, I know that you started in the military. Where do we go from there?
So I flew CH-53 Echoes in the Marine Corps. I was stationed in Miramar. I mean, it's tough duty, but somebody's got to do it.
Of course.
But no. So that's really where I got my start. My last tour was as a flight instructor, and probably the favorite job that I've ever had until now. It was as a flight instructor back at Whiting Field in Florida. Training all the new helicopter pilots for the Marines, Navy, and Coast Guard, and a few international students. And we're flying Bell 206s.
Nice.
No autopilot, but they're IFR certified because it's the military. So,
oh gosh.
You're flying approaches to MINS, ILS to MINS in a
206.
Bell 206.
Wow.
So pretty good experience, great experience. You get to do a lot of flying there. So I would some days fly 6 or 8 hours. So that was a great experience. And then it really gets you, back into the civilian rules when you're doing that, because you're teaching all of the civilian kind of rules, all the airway navigation, all those kinds of things that as a military pilot sometimes you forget because military has their own set of rules. And I think that really helped with the transition to the civilian side. Was doing that.
I have several buddies that have come from military to civilian, and I know that there's sometimes a bit of a transition. In the military, you're typically flying with 2 pilots.
Yeah.
You're in really, really nice equipment. I even remember having students, come from a Black Hawk to an R-22.
Yep.
Doing training, and well, in the Black Hawk we could land this way. I'm like, well, we're in an R-22. We can't quite do it this way. With that flight instruction, was it all military instructors, or was it a mix of military and civilian? Because I do know there are some civilian instructors teaching that ab initio training.
Yeah, so we had civilian instructors on the simulator side when we were there, and most of those, I think all of them were retired military.
Okay.
And then, for the most part, all the instructors that are actually flight instructors are military people that have done their at least one fleet tour, and now they're coming back to kind of shed their experience and knowledge. And then you have a reserve cadre that are there, and some of those guys had been there for 15, 20 years as reservists.
Okay.
Doing that flight training.
And what year did you finish that up?
So I left there in 2013.
Okay.
And I went to work for a company called CHC, who's a international oil and gas mostly. They do some search and rescue in the UK. But I got to fly 139s, AW139s for them in Mozambique for a couple of years.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was not a bad job.
Not bad at all. And you said that was for oil and gas?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to connect dots. I don't think I had anyone that was there.
Yeah, I mean, there's I've got a lot of good friends from there. And that was a really good experience. Going through the type rating for the 139. I was pretty young at the time. I was early 30s. I was the youngest person in my type rating class by like a decade.
Yeah.
But you learn a lot of things there. I mean, because there's for example, there's something called floats on helicopters that go over the water. In the military, I'd never even heard of floats. So I'm, in class raising my hand. They kept talking about floats and how to pop the floats, and I'm raised my hand like an idiot. What are floats?
What are floats?
They're like, you deployed on a ship for 7 months and you don't know what floats are? So
that's wild.
Yeah.
I guess I always just assumed that the military helicopters probably had some type of floats. So, I mean, obviously not knowing about the floats, was there anything else that was kind of challenging coming from a military background to going to the civilian to this first civilian job?
I think it was for me a pretty seamless transition. I think mostly because I was able to do that fleet or the flight instructor tour, where you're getting into the FAR aim, you're studying a ton in order to be able to ask the students questions and to teach the students. So doing that and getting really, really in-depth knowledge of the nuances of the civilian world and the rules and the regulations in the FAR aim was really helpful. So and then military, it's all hand flying. At least it was when I was in, and so that makes it easier. So you're learning to use an autopilot kind of for the first time, but all the hand flying stuff, came pretty easy.
Came naturally.
Yeah.
The 139 must be awesome too.
Oh, it was a phenomenal aircraft to fly.
I like what I'm doing in my career now on the sales side, but I did kind of stall my flying career a little bit. I've never flown anything with two engines.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I'm a little envious, with guys that have got experience in, say, a 139 or even a 429. I'd love to get my hands on a 429, but I guess you pick your path, right? So,
sure. Yeah.
So you do that for a couple years. Was there a little burnout that caused it just to be 2 years, or just wanted to kind of change gears?
Yeah, the travel gets pretty tough. I had a young family at the time. My daughter, I think when I started there, was about 4, and so she's getting ready to start school, and so the travel gets tough. And to get to Mozambique, it's a 5-hour flight to Atlanta, and then it's a 14-hour flight to South Africa, and then you've got a layover that's 12 or 14 hours, and then you've got another 3-hour flight up to, I was in Pemba, and then you're gone for 6 weeks at a time, and so it's just the travel got kind of long, and so an opportunity came up here, and that worked out well actually, because right after I left, the oil market kind of had a big downturn, and so I had already had the job here, so it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, that would be wild. I had some friends that flew in Angola,
Yeah.
and some of the guys did it for years,
Mm-hmm.
and month on, month off, travel.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I guess, I don't know how it worked for you, but I was just talking to my buddy Sean about it. He would, some days, duty on the day that he would actually get there. So here he is finishing this long travel period, and then he's dutying on. It's like, I just got back from Thailand, and that kicked my butt for like 7 days on jet lag. So,
yeah, fortunately, at least the contract that I was on, with CHC, and CHC was they do a safety summit every year. They're very safety oriented, and so I never had to do that where it's like you show up and then they want you to fly that day.
Yeah,
but
I thought that was wild. I definitely couldn't do it. So you had an opportunity. Obviously, being from Canby, you were familiar with Life Flight.
Yeah, I was, and I had kind of driven by the airport, and it's like, maybe I'll drop off a resume, and so I happened to drop it off at the front desk, and then a couple weeks later got a phone call. They just said, and I was getting ready to go do another trip to Africa, and so I said, well, I can interview, but it'd have to be like this week because I'm leaving on Saturday or whatever it was, and so they had me come in and made an offer that day, and that was that.
That's awesome. I like that you kind of were. This is kind of a funny story. My first turbine job was with Maverick helicopters,
Okay,
flying
sure.
tours, and I had lost my job in Texas, and I was kind of desperate.
Mm-hmm.
I was like parking cars as a valet, and I was like, I need to be flying, and I could never hear back from anyone. It was kind of like that during that time that it almost seemed like a bit of a desert of hiring, especially for low time guys, and so I heard that Maverick was bringing people on with little to no turbine time, which was a kind of a new thing for them. So I sent a resume off, and like that day I heard from the chief pilot, which never happened. It never happens ever, and it finally happened. And it was just before Christmas, and I was so stressed, I wasn't making any money. And the chief pilot there at the time said, yeah, come, we'll get you in for an interview after Christmas. And I was like, oh man, I can't wait till that's in 3 or 4 weeks. So I was like, I'm actually going to be in Vegas this week, like if you're available. And, sure enough, like 2 days later, he's like, cool, can you meet me tomorrow? And I was in San Antonio at the time, like, I better get airfare. But, I think it's important sometimes, like, to, if you need to get a job, just do what it takes to get there. And I've never publicly told that story, so now I've
now the
told
world
it to
knows.
everyone. Now the world knows. Jim O, if you're listening, I'm sorry for telling you that I was in Vegas, but I showed up on time, so I was there. So you get hired at Life Flight as a line pilot.
Yeah.
And this still boggles me. I'm very excited to hear kind of your process and your experience here, but that's in 2015, 2023 now, and here I'm sitting with you in the corner office as the CEO of this large air medical company. Was that something that you ever even thought of, or you just came on to be a line pilot?
Yeah, no, my philosophy kind of in general is do the best you can do wherever you are. When I was in Africa working, we had a really great crew there, and we all just worked hard. And even when we weren't flying, we'd get together and study, right? Be professional, learn everything you can learn. And so I've always kind of had that mentality. I never had if I do this, then I could get the next step, right? Things have just worked out, I guess. That how I got into the management role here. I was a line pilot, and then we were growing, and they needed a training guy. They never had a training person before. It was always the assistant chief pilots or the chief pilot DO that would do all the training. And were about to do a big merger, and grow, and a lot of pilots needed to be trained. So they were going to hire a training guy. Well, I had a training background from my time in the Marines, and so I applied for that job and got it. So then I was like a float pilot and a training pilot. And so I did that. So I was a float pilot for a year, and then I was the training pilot / float pilot for about a year. And we were getting ready to open a base in Bozeman, Montana, and I was standing a night shift in Astoria, Oregon. And I got off the night shift, and I'm driving home, which is about a 2-hour drive home for me. And the current director of safety at that time called me up, and he said he knew that I'd been to aviation safety officer school when I was in the Marines, and so he knew that I had that safety kind of background. And so he called up and he said, "Hey, have you ever thought about being the safety guy? Because I want to go be a line pilot in Bozeman, Montana." So he was going to step back from management and then go, do the 7-day on, 7-day off schedule and get to fly a lot in Bozeman. And I kind of said, yeah, I guess. I hadn't really thought about it, but he said, okay, well, the CEO would like to meet with you in like 2 hours. Can you get here? And so, I drove in here, interviewed, and a couple months, like a month later, I guess I was the director of safety. And so then again, just grow where you plant it, study hard, work hard, and then I've had various kind of opportunities since then. Just kind of doing good things at the company. I think I spent some time as the DO on an interim basis while we were recruiting for our current DO. I eventually got promoted to be the chief safety officer, and so I was in charge of several different departments in addition to safety at the company. And then eventually became the COO, and I was the COO for about a year, and then moved into this role.
For our listeners out there that might be new to aviation or haven't been part of a big flight department, when you say safety officer or director of safety, what did that role entitle here at LifeFlight?
So, at LifeFlight Network, specifically at our company, safety is a huge thing, right? It's the focus of everything. So we tend to run a little bit heavy on the safety department, right? It's not some companies will have a safety officer, like you said, or but we're it's a director level position. The current director of safety reports directly to me as the CEO. I was the director of safety and risk management, reporting to the CEO, and so it involves knowing things, knowing the people, getting out, talking to the people. One of the things that I instituted was a crew resource management program, an in-person crew resource management program, and so we go around in groups of 20 or so people, and pilots, paramedics, nurses, now mechanics are doing it as well, and we do crew resource management. Because if you think about from a safety aspect, what are the things that are happening out in the industry that are causing people to have crashes, that are hurting people, and it often comes down to lack of communication or lack of good, solid crew resource management. And so it's really important to focus on those skills. So that was a big focus of what I did. When I was in the safety role, we have a very robust reporting system here. So we're coming up on about 900 employees now. When I was in the role, I think we had about 600 employees, but we would get maybe 700 safety reports a year. And everybody is out there, and we encourage and even mandate that if you see something, say something, put it into a report so that we can look into it and figure out, how do we make it better? How do we prevent whatever happened or almost happened? Because that's the goal, right? Like figure out, hey, this is a risk. Nothing bad happened yet, but I saw this and it's a risk, and how can we mitigate that so that nothing bad does happen?
Sure.
So that's what I spent a lot of time doing, is talking to people. They would see something that was a risk. Okay, how do we mitigate that? How do we improve upon that? We also have a safety and risk management committee that's composed of line personnel across all the disciplines, and they'll come up with ideas. We'll bounce things off of them and say, hey, what do you guys think of this? This report came in. What do you guys think?
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, it's safety. Is in air medical especially has really changed a lot. Or I guess the term safety.
Yeah.
Carried a different tone, say 20 years ago, than it does today, and what I experienced when I flew air medical, and then even in the flight school that I went to here just in Hillsboro, is that it seems that a lot of the same hazards were happening on kind of a systemic basis. And so, the flight school that I went to, the air medical company that I worked for, they were always supportive of getting the feedback, even if you as a pilot maybe thought you made a mistake or did something wrong, because then they were able to kind of put together a systemic, hey, this is not just a singular problem that Halsey had. Yeah. This is actually happening to Halsey, and it happened to so and so and so and so, and you can kind of start to see, okay, hey, maybe this is a little bit of a flaw in the way that we're doing things, and learning from it, growing from it. I'm not so sure 15, 20 years ago that air medical companies specifically were really asking for too much reporting. I know the industry's changed a lot, and I'm grateful that I flew, recently in air medical and not 20 years ago for a lot of reasons. Obviously the equipment's changed a lot, but I think the biggest thing is just, allowing pilots to make good pilot decisions. Yeah. And supporting pilots, and I'm sure that you guys have probably instituted that here at LifeFlight as well.
Yeah, and it's actually really encouraging across the industry to see that kind of culture shift. We're part of the Air Medical Operators Association, and I was on the safety committee for a number of years, and now our current director of safety goes to the safety committee meetings, and collectively the industry will share stories. Hey, this not just within the company, but hey, this happened to us. It could happen to you too. And so those are so critical, and they meet in person 4 times a year as the safety committee, and I'm on the board of directors there now. And those filter to the board of directors level, and so even though many of us are competitors that are in that room, it's all about safety, and it's all how do we get better as an industry? How do we ensure that we're preventing crashes or preventing bad things from happening? And I think it's really encouraging.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I mean, at the end of the day, competitors, whether you have an accident or a competitor has an accident, first and foremost, you never want to have any type of loss of life.
Yeah.
And second off, it's not great for any part of the helicopter industry to have accidents. So it's good to hear that companies are coming together and sharing safety insight to hopefully get to some target where we could get to a point where we could have, little to no accidents, which would be fantastic. At the last operator that I worked at, and actually at my flight school, that was kind of an early adapter to SMS, adopted onto a just culture.
Yep.
Is that something that you guys have instituted here at LifeFlight? And for our listeners that may not be familiar with that term, what does that mean to you?
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought that up. A just culture. So in order to find out about these things that we can share with the industry so that we can get better, you have to have a just culture. And what I mean by that is people have to be willing and feel safe that they can raise their hand and say, hey, I screwed up, or I almost screwed up, or I was thinking this and that was the wrong thing to think. And they're not worried that they're going to lose their job if they speak up, right? Because it can make all of us better. And that's something that we've really tried hard to inculcate throughout the organization. And we have really great examples of that. We'll have pilots call and say, hey, I think I screwed this up. Can you pull the tapes from the video? We've got the camera or whatever. Can you pull the tape so I can see what I did and see it, and we can debrief as a crew. And that's so encouraging when stuff like that happens, because it just shows the maturity and the professionalism that our pilots have and that our crews have, because our crews want the pilots to tell them as well, right?
Of course.
And then they're not castigating the pilots for, oh, you almost made a mistake, or it's like, hey, how do we all get better collectively? And then we'll share those stories when we do the crew resource management training, and share these errors or mistakes that people have made in the spirit of getting better.
I think Just Culture has been great, not just for air medical, but for the entire helicopter industry.
Yeah.
So many different companies and operators are instituting Just Culture, and I think it's making an impact. I think another big thing on the air medical side, so if you're listening and you want to be an air medical pilot, one of the biggest advices that I can give from my experience is, I think, again, 15, 20 years ago, a pilot may look at a crew and not think that they're an integral part of the safety of that mission. I've heard terms like self-loading baggage and other things like that. And I know that's really shifted. And it sounds like you guys are being proactive with your crew resource management for pilots, medics, nurses working together to have a positive result.
Yeah, and part of it comes down to trust amongst the crew, right? And not just trust like, oh, I trust the pilot is going to be great, and so I don't have to worry about anything. It's no, like, I trust the crew to be looking out for me. If maybe everybody could have a bad day, could make a mistake, and the crew is trusting that if they ask a question, somebody's not going to take offense to it. Hey, that cloud doesn't look good to me. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And then if you ever want to get a pilot going, ask them about weather. And
Totally.
they'll wax eloquent for quite a while.
Of course.
But have those conversations, ask the questions, be a good teammate. And it's that's the goal, and that's but you have to have a positive culture. You have to have a trusting culture, and that's something that we really, really try hard here to make sure that everybody understands that we're out there not just to avoid errors, to avoid mistakes, but to be excellent in everything that we do, whether that's clinical care, whether that's piloting, whether it's the maintenance staff, whether it's the admin staff that's supporting everything. It's how do you achieve excellence, maintain excellence. It's not just a matter of avoiding a mistake.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a big shift in mindset and coming together as a team, and trying to bring your A game every day, but doing it collectively. Is there's a lot of factors that go into an air medical mission. A lot of things. For me personally, I was flying in a fairly sparse area in South Texas. A lot of nighttime scene calls. You're flying into dark holes in the middle of nowhere. Having that extra set of eyes in the back with goggles on was comforting and reassuring. I was smart enough to know that I'm not actually God's gift to flying helicopters, right? I'm a human and have my human limits. And so there was many times that my crew, whether it was on a recon or whatever it may be, had said something that, hey, what about that wire down there? Do you see that? Okay, I didn't see that actually. Thank you for pointing that out. Or, hey, I did see that. I didn't announce it yet. Being able to work together like that, I think that there's probably been situations in my career on the air medical side that maybe saved my butt a little bit by allowing my crew to be a part of the mission, not just people sitting in the back. So that's been important for me. And if you're listening and you want to get into air medical, come in here. Especially where I was at, some of the crew members have been flying in helicopters longer than I've been a helicopter pilot.
Right.
And they've been flying in that specific mission for a long time. So they may not know what retreating blade stall is, or, the dissymmetry of lift, whatever, but they understand that mission and they know what how you can do it safely. And so going into a base and not coming off as a know-it-all,
right.
Especially, straight out of Neo. You want to come in there, be humble, make sure that, you're open to their feedback.
Well, yeah, that humility I think is so important. And I'm reminded of a military story. I was out. You do a lot of practice in the military. So you're out practicing these desert landings at night. No, MVGs, no goggle, or no moon. You're flying on goggles, and I remember this flight, and I'm flying, and I'm shooting. I mean, this is going to be the perfect desert approach. And this thing, I mean, I'm shooting this approach in the 53. You kind of ride the shakers down. And this is going to be the perfect no hover landing. It's just, I mean, I'm just feeling confident. And the crew chief, all of a sudden, I get to about 2 feet, and the crew chief calls for power, and he's got a little bit of alarm in his voice. He's power, power, and so I am confused that he's calling it, but okay, cool. So I squeak in a little bit of power, and I come to a stop at like 6 inches, and me and the other pilot are looking at each other like, what is he, and then I hear oh, sorry, sir. Yeah, I thought I saw something, but I didn't. My bad. But hey, no problem, man. Thank you for calling it. You thought you saw something. You called it. You didn't hesitate. And so, but we could have yelled at him and been like, man, you screwed up my approach, right? But that would have. Is he going to speak up the next time? No,
Absolutely not.
And so that we try to we can all be wrong when we announce things, and it's okay. And create that trusting, fostering environment. And we try really hard to do that here too.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I mean, pilots, by and large, sometimes have a bit of a type A personality. I would like to say I'm an exception, but there's a little ego in here. And so being willing to learn and learn from others' experiences, whether it's a pilot or a crew member, I think is vital, specifically in the aeromedical world. For you, kind of transitioning back to you starting as a line pilot, again, a lot of our listeners are intrigued about aeromedical. Mm-hmm. What is, first off, what airframe were you flying since you were afloat? Were you kind of checked out in all the airframes, or?
I started out in Augusta 119s, and then when we got the EC-135, so I became a check pilot on the 119 and on the EC-135, and so I was flying both of those.
Cool. And I guess as a float, I mean, that's probably pretty cool because you get to experience different locations. Mm-hmm. For me, when I worked aeromedical, I was just kind of at one spot, mm-hmm. which is nice. You get comfortable with your service area and comfortable with the people. I guess that could also present some challenges at times where you're coming into a base and having to kind of reacquaint yourself with new location, new people. Was that difficult?
For me, it was actually kind of fun because you get to meet new people, you get to work with different people, and it might go 4 or 5 months between the times when you visit a base and then you're working with the same people that you worked with a few months ago. So for me, it was an opportunity, and it was an opportunity to learn from a lot of people. You could see how different med crews what were their techniques. We do try to be very standardized here, so that makes it easier. So that what we always used to. When I was in the safety role, tell people is if it's me flying or if it's somebody else flying, it should feel the exact same in the back. It should, just other than the voice that's talking to you. But for me, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed being able to meet a lot of the people. I've flown with a good percentage of the people in the company. When I got into the training role, then I was doing check rides with a lot of different people and training flights with a lot of the different pilots. So just kind of getting to get out there and interact with people, and then again, learning everywhere you go. You're never too good or experienced or anything to learn. And there's pilots in our company that have way more hours than I do. I mean, I'm not a particularly high time guy, but just learn everything you can everywhere you go.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably now in this position that you're in, now leading this company, being able to have that experience of being at multiple bases, probably gives you a better perspective than maybe if you were just at one base. So I'm sure that's been helpful. In aeromedical, one of the things that I struggled with was the nights. I didn't necessarily love the nights. It was hard for me to adjust. We did 7 straight, so that also, I have some things to say about that, but maybe that's for a different podcast. But, that was hard for me. What were some of the struggles for you coming into aeromedical that presented more challenge than you thought?
Yeah, I think as a float, right, you're going to different places all over. And so you may show up at a base and you've done your local area exam or whatever, but, you don't have a lot of experience flying in that area. And so, I remember took off for a flight out of Aurora one time is early morning right before shift change, and I think the ceilings were calling 1,400 feet or something, and so I looked at it, I looked at the HEMS tool, I'm checking on my weather, I'm like, okay, yep, we can do that safely, and it's within limits, and so I took off and I got about 2 miles out and realized nope, can't do it. So turned around, came back, and by that time the guy that had been here for 20 years, Bob Smart, he's coming out to meet us and help get fuel and stuff. And I said, yeah, I was trying to go up to this LZ. And he's like, oh, no, you need 1,700 feet for that. You can't do that at 14. And so, but he had that knowledge of years and years, and I didn't know. So consequently, as a float, be more conservative. You're not going to know all the tricks of every different area.
Sure.
And so it's important to use good judgment to know what your box is and just make good decisions, and don't be afraid to turn around. If the weather is deteriorating, you get to your end decision point, or you think I might get to my end, turn around.
Yeah.
It's much better to do that than the alternative.
Yeah, I mean, and that's tough with air medical, right? Because the purpose is to go and hopefully help someone else on a really bad day that they're having. But there's obviously weather is obviously a huge factor of sometimes having to turn down a call or turn around. And I think it's important for all pilots to, especially air medical, constantly evaluating. I mean, I was on the phone coming down here today, and today it seemed like a weird kind of weather day for me because I'm driving down I-5 and I can see Mount Hood, but it's like this weird haze. And I'm talking to my buddy who's flying air medical right now. I'm like, man, this would be one of those days that would be a weird because you can't really tell where the ceiling begins. Obviously I wasn't looking at any weather products
Sure.
while driving, but it just like visually seeing like, God, weather can be so weird. I can see Mount Hood, but maybe the ceiling's 900 feet, or whatnot. And, constantly evaluating. And I know for me, I did get nice being kind of in one specific location because in Texas, like I could look at the forecast and see where the second the dew point and temp meet, I just knew it would get foggy, just what it did there in South Texas. And so being able to kind of have that area familiarization was helpful. So coming from line pilot, you do your training, obviously kind of step into, it sounds like you naturally kind of just progressed your way in and you took advantage of opportunities as they came. I'm guessing when you took the safety officer position, did that take you away from flying?
No, I still tried to stay in flying as much as I could. So less, but I was still picking up shifts when I could. I think my first couple weeks I had 9 shifts or something, in a row, and so I still tried to fly. Once I kind of moved into the more executive roles, I made a valiant attempt at one. I think the last. Like 3 years ago, I was like, I'm gonna get recurrent. I'm gonna do it, and I did a couple, and it just didn't work. So again, to be safe, to be proficient, and really really good at our pilots that we have are fantastic. And so for me to go out there and kind of fake it once a month or something, that's not fair to the crews. It's not fair to the I've got other things that I can do. They're the ones that are out there training hard, working hard at that stuff, and being the experts and so kind of leave it to them at this point. It's nice to be able to do it. We have a simulator here, so every once in a while I'll jump in and shoot a couple of instrument approaches just to kind of shake the dust off a little bit.
Sure.
But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you kind of make a career choice, and specifically when you come to the executive side, I think again currency, recency is obviously a big deal, but also just bandwidth. There's a lot probably on your plate that you're dealing with. So if you're, taking a shift here or there, maybe your mental state could be somewhere else. So that could be definitely difficult. Obviously, like you said, superior pilots here at Life Flight Network. I know a lot of them. Small industry, and so I know a lot of my friends fly here. For our listeners that are interested in working at Life Flight, what are the minimums, and what kind of individual are you looking for as a pilot for this company?
Great question. So I think we're a CAMES accredited program, and CAMES requires 2,500 hours, and so that's kind of the basics is kind of 2,500 hours. By the time you get to there, you probably have the other requisite experience, whether it's I think it's 100 hours of instrument. You know, so it's helpful if, you know, night vision goggle experience is, you know, night experience. And then advice I would give to anybody, no matter what you're going to do in the helicopter flying world, is get as much instrument time as you can. You may never use it, but if you ever have to use it, at least you've got it in your back pocket.
Totally.
And so, you know, I would say if you ever get a chance, you know, get in a simulator so that you can actually experience that transition, right? Or if you can, you know, if you can get fortunate enough to fly in an instrument platform as a co-pilot, you know, start there, and then try to build that. Obviously, there's phenomenal pilots that have never flown in a cloud that they do, you know, you mentioned the buzzsaw thing or the torchlight. I mean, crazy amount of skill that it takes. You know, the long lining thing. I mean,
Totally.
Crazy amount of skill and competence. So, you know, the instrument stuff's not particularly applicable to those regimes. But again, if you ever had to use it, you'd have it in your back pocket.
Yeah, I mean, and especially with air medical, for me getting into air medical, my disuse and non-recency of my instrument ticket was apparent.
Yeah.
And I struggled a little bit in the initial training they were doing in the simulator there, and then some hood practice in the aircraft. Knocking off that rust was difficult for me. And it's so valuable to be able to feel comfortable. You know, again, I would consider myself a phenomenal VFR pilot. Maybe not so much anymore, but I used to be okay. You know, but I was kind of on the mindset of like clouds, you know, stay away at all costs.
Right.
And, you know, what I learned flying air medical is you could do everything right. You could call your weather perfectly. You could make all the right decisions, and something could change on the weather, especially at night.
Yeah.
This big sprawling area in South Texas where I was, lots of vast area up here in the Pacific Northwest where things can change. And if that changes and you're up there, being able to admit that you're there, and then have a plan of action of, okay, I'm in the clouds, what next? And, you know, being able to be comfortable in IMC inadvertently. I know at the company I worked at, it saved a lot of lives, you know. I think the year that I left, we ended up having 8 or 9 entries into IMC by accident. And we were a strict VFR program. And they're all not events, because every quarter pilots went, they trained, we did our simulator time there, and we practiced. And in all those situations, the pilots did everything right. They just, things changed. The weather changes really quick down there. And so, yeah, I can't echo enough what you said. If you're out there and you have the chance to go and experience IFR flying, even in an airplane, you know, getting into a Cessna and going and shooting approaches, getting that comfortability of entering a cloud. I was recently talking with my buddy Ian, a former Marine, and he was a crew chief in the 53s. You know, and he was saying, man, the first time he entered IMC, he worked for Life Flight of Maine. He said that, you know, the first he felt like he was dirty. You know, he felt like he was doing something wrong. You know, and it's just if you can gain that experience and comfortability, you can cut probably a lot of the anxiety that goes into entering the clouds for the first time.
Well, and as you know, I mean, that anxiety can cause you to make mistakes, right?
Totally.
So, you know, clearly, you don't want to go inadvertent IMC. Avoid it,
of course,
to the maximum extent. You know, and I don't want to undermine the seriousness of that situation, but training, you know, and just, you know, try to get in the sim and train as much as you can. And again, it's all about hard work and learning everything that you can, so that you can learn from other people's mistakes. You can see what mistakes could happen. You can kind of project and predict. I'm getting myself into a situation here. Maybe you stop before it ever anything ever comes close to happening.
Yeah, I mean, they always talk about the Swiss cheese, right? You know, it's not usually just one singular event that leads to a negative outcome. You know, it's usually a series of events. So let's say that I'm a pilot, which is true story. I am. And I come here, I get hired on at Life Flight. What does your guys' training program look like from kind of day one through, you know, getting to base, maybe doing some shadow shifts, things like that? What does that all look like as a new pilot here?
Yeah, so we start out once a month. We call it New Employee Orientation, or NEO, and everybody that's starting that month all comes together from all the disciplines, and so we that's about 2.5 days of just basic company kind of stuff, history. I'll talk to everybody. I'm the first person they see when they get here. We talk mostly about safety and quality, and I'll sit down for about 3 hours and we'll talk through safety stuff, safety systems. I want everybody in the company to hear from me that my emphasis is on safety and quality.
It's amazing.
And so we do that, and then the last part of that for the operational folks, so pilots, paramedics, nurses, mechanics, and EMTs is crew resource management. So we do a half a day of crew resource management right at the beginning. And then they'll break off into their kind of separate disciplines. And so as a pilot, then you'll go off into our training kind of pipeline. So depending on the aircraft, you'll have to do ground school. We've got both in-person ground school. There's some online modules that people do, and then we try to get everybody in the simulator, and then the flight training following the simulator. You obviously have breaks in there in training to get your time off. But then you'll go and shadow, and so you'll shadow once you're done with your check ride and stuff, and you'll go shadow, and you'll kind of learn the ropes and observe and watch for a while, and then you'll have kind of start standing shifts, and when you start standing shifts, so we have different when you first get here, there's different weather minimums, so we increase those weather minimums as a risk mitigation, and mostly to take the pressure off of the pilots. One thing we don't do, our flights are flight requests. We don't call them missions, and there's a reason for that, right? We don't want the mentality of the pilot that you're out there doing some sort of search and rescue or something where you should take extra risk. No, we have minimums. We have and then we have higher minimums for newer people in order to purposely take that pressure off. Like, hey, I can't do that because these are my minimums now, and so it's not a mission; it's a flight request, and I'm turning down this flight request.
Yeah, because I don't meet the requirements. And
then if depending on the aircraft that we'll either send you to, if we can, if there's a simulator available, we'll send you to simulator training. So EC-135, we have some contract simulators that we'll use. We actually dry lease the simulators, so we'll send our own training people down with you as a pilot.
Oh, cool.
And we'll put you through the simulator training. And then, we'll use Bell Training Academy as a partner that we use for the 429 and the 407s. So we'll send them actually down to Bell's facility.
Oh, that's incredible.
Anytime we can do factory training, we try to do that.
I'm very jealous of that. I think the former company that I flew for, they had a good training program, but we didn't get to go to the Bell Training Academy, and I feel like that would have been really a nice benefit. Going down and flying with instructor pilots that fly those machines every single day for the purpose of practicing emergency procedures would have been really valuable. So that's really cool. I didn't know that you guys did that. I'm jealous. I might have to knock off the resume. Yeah, I know. Any in Bend, that would be nice. I don't want to go too far.
We do have a base in Redmond.
I think I don't know what he's flying. A guy that I worked with at another air medical company, he now is a life flight guy.
Okay.
And, I think he's over in Bend too. And yeah, I see him skiing quite a bit. And, that's a good life over there.
And they're 182 days off, yeah?
182 days off. Lots of time to ski. Very cool. With, is there any recurrent training throughout the year, or is it just you doing your check ride every year?
Yeah, so we do recurrent training, and we try to centralize the recurrent training. So regardless of airframe, we try to bring people back to Aurora. We do the recurrent training, even if they're like our simulators, a Bell 407 GXI sim, but we'll put 119 guys and gals into the sim. EC-135 pilots, we'll put them in the sim as well, just when we can. Just to. It's a great experience. The EC-135 is a little bit less because they get to go to the simulator, full level D.
Yeah, full motion type deal.
And so they're doing that. But we like to get as much use out of the simulator as we can, and we like to standardize our training, standardize our recurrent, and then of course we have the quarterly double IMC training flights that we do. Another thing that we talk about proficiency and with night vision goggles, particularly, we encourage the pilots that, hey, you know what, I haven't flown in a while. I need to go out and get a night vision recurrent proficiency flight, and so we just go do it.
Yeah.
They just call the operational control center and say, hey, I need to do a proficiency flight tonight. So this is what time I'm going to do it, and we encourage that. And then we do have even metrics like you haven't done a night flight in 30 days, therefore you must go do a proficiency.
That happened to me a lot. Like I would get on my okay, I got to go do my currency, because you're off. You're only one night. If you have a slow week of nights, you may not get the opportunity to go fly, and before you know it, you've reached your limit. So. At LifeFlight, how does it work? A request comes in.
Yeah.
It goes to an operations control center or a dispatch.
Yeah. So our communication center and our operational control center are co-located in Boise. We like to have them co-located because it gives awareness. So the operational control specialist can hear when a flight request comes in from a customer somewhere, and they can already start checking the weather. They kind of know where that request is going to go. And so they're independently checking the weather to make sure they think that the weather is safe. And then the pilot will get the flight request. So the ComSpec will page the flight request to the pilot. And the pilot will, hey, checking weather, or I can accept clear blue day, and they stay on top of their weather, pretty good, so they can make a decision pretty quickly. And then if there's any kind of a disagreement between the pilot and the operational control specialist, they'll conference them in and they'll talk about that. Essentially, though, anybody can say no to the flight request, whether it's the paramedic or even the mechanic, ComSpec, OCS. Anybody can say, hey, you know what, no. And that's and we encourage that, right? Because somebody could see something that somebody else doesn't.
Sure.
So then the pilot will make the decision, and then if they say yes, then okay, away they go, and the OCS agrees, away they go, and they do the flight. If they say no, if it's for the destination or the patient pickup location, then we will not offer that to another pilot. It would probably go to a fixed wing at that point.
Sure.
Because then they've got different minimums. If it's en route, then maybe we'll look and say, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. They can't take the flight because there's weather between them and that scene, but this other base is coming from a completely different direction. There's no weather there, and maybe they can get it. So if that's the case, then we will offer it, but we'll say, hey, flight request for this location, so this other base turned it down. Would you like to conference between those, and talk to that person of the OCS, and then we can get that conference call going as well.
Totally. Yeah, that's good. For our listeners out there that may not be kind of familiar with an operations control center, who are they?
Yeah.
Obviously you talked a little bit about it. They're kind of shadowing, making sure, but what kind of actual operational control do they have within your guys' system?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of nuances. It's mandated by the FAA if you're an operator with 10 or more bases. But essentially, they're people that have specialized training in weather and operations. And some of ours are former pilots that just for whatever reason decided they'd rather do this operational control job. And so they're really there as a second set of eyes. And it's a really valuable safety tool for us, and I'm glad that we have it. And we would, even if the FAA didn't mandate it, we would have it because I think it's just such a valuable resource to have.
Sure. And you mentioned something about how anyone can kind of turn down a flight. It's not just the burden of the pilot to say no.
Right.
I've heard terms like the 51% rule, where everyone in the crew holds 51%, meaning at any time a flight can be vetoed, and that's kind of the same stance here, obviously. So that's, again, I've never personally been in a situation because I think it goes back to communication.
Mm-hmm.
I would start my shift with my crew and do a good, thorough crew brief, understand the day, and I always kind of felt like, we as a collective group would make the decision of go or no go. Mm-hmm. I felt like maybe if I was having a medic have to do a 51% on me, then I maybe didn't do a good job at communicating, because I feel like if I was listening to them, I would just turn down the flight. So it's good that they hold that power, but on the same token, I also feel that at least the way that I perceived it as a pilot, is that if it got to that point, then maybe I missed a step in my process.
And I would agree, and that's, but and that's that crew resource management thing. That's why we do spend quite a bit of time and energy on crew resource management to, like you said, have that familial conversation, so that it doesn't get to the point where somebody says, you know what, I'm going to veto the flight. It's, you're having a conversation, and everybody kind of can come to that collective decision. Ultimately, obviously, it's the pilot in command's is responsible for the safe and orderly conduct of the flight. But everybody, they're in the aircraft too, right?
Yeah, they should have a voice, and
Yep,
they do.
absolutely.
And that's a big change from, this industry has evolved a lot.
Yeah.
Helicopters in general, air medical, hugely, advancements in technology and just crew resource management, things like that. We are kind of wrapping up.
Yeah.
I do like to finish off just with some low-level fun questions. So obviously, you're the CEO of a company. First off, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I know that's kind of a recent promotion, so that's really exciting and really cool. I would be curious to actually know how many other CEOs of air medical companies started as line pilots for that company. I feel like that's super valuable to be able to go through a company like that, because you truly have been at every section of this company. So that's cool. So when you're not here being the CEO, what are you doing for fun?
I don't have any time for fun. No. We family, wife and daughter. We like to ski, hike, camp. It's Oregon, so outdoor stuff. We don't have to worry about ticks or usually not snakes unless you get over to Eastern Oregon.
Yeah.
But, outdoor stuff.
I saw a lot of snakes in Texas.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of rattlesnakes. I'm like Indiana Jones. I'm pretty brave, but terrified of snakes. So yeah. Now, of course, I'm in Bend, and I think there is snakes there
yep.
too,
Mm-hmm.
which is upsetting. Well, Ben, thank you so much for having me here. This has been an awesome opportunity. It's been fun to learn more about Life Flight Network. If guys or gals are listening right now and they're at that 2,500 hours,
Yeah.
and they're ready to go, they're charged up, how do they find you guys? How do they find job openings? What's kind of that first step for them?
So lifeflight.org is our website. All of our job openings are there. I think we recruit on LinkedIn as well. Lifeflight.org, and we do have openings now. So, we're growing. We're a strong company. So, bring on the applications.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, GXIs, 429s,
Yeah.
135s, 119s. A lot of super cool airframes for
Yeah.
pilots to fly.
Yeah.
And not to mention the Pacific Northwest, in my opinion. I'm a little biased, but is there a better place?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I loved where I lived in Texas, but nothing beats the Pacific Northwest. Well, Ben, thank you so much for having me here. Congratulations again, and I'm really excited to see Life Flight continue to grow and prosper, and we appreciate what you all do.
Yeah, thanks, Halsey. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, appreciate it.